Dawn of the fourth day. 96 hours remain until the Japanese release of Fire Emblem Warriors. The Tokyo Game Show rolls around, and in between IGN reviewers getting emotional and Polygon reviewers getting fake married, what do we find? Last-minute news on Fire Emblem Warriors! Oh boy, I'm so excited! If the hype train is a real thing, it almost went off the rails and exploded recently, but was miraculously saved by the quick thinking of a brave heroine named Lynn. Plot twist, the villain who was trying to derail the train survived, killed the engineer, and just planted explosives in the engine room. The hype train is seconds away from exploding and killing everyone. When did the blazing sword happen? Fire Emblem Warriors' relationship with the masses has been rocky at best, but the promise of DLC making things better was sort of the last hurrah. Sure, we're getting predominantly the cast of the 3 games with the most criticized characters, but we can hang tight for a month or two until we get the classics, right? Except the DLC was just announced at the Tokyo Game Show, and all 3 packs are focusing on those 3 games all over again. This game's whole development cycle has basically just been Wimp Lo from Kung Pao utilizing his nuts to fist style and thinking he's winning. It looks like an otherwise great game, and I will invest in the game and its DLC, but every step of the way it's been fighting itself like a Pokemon with a chronic case of confusion. This is the death of a brilliant idea. Here's what could have been done differently to save it. Note that I am not Koei Tecmo's marketing team nor their PR department, but I also don't have to be because this should be plain to anyone remotely familiar with Fire Emblem and its fans. Don't release it a week before Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey is shaping up to be Nintendo's biggest blockbuster since Breath of the Wild, and the biggest blockbuster before that was practically nothing since not much had generated so much hype. In today's skeletal economy, not everyone can afford to buy 2 $60 games back to back. I mean, I will, but that's because I'm reckless and stupid, and I've saved up for them. You have some open slots in November and December for big game releases, and controversial though it may have been, you could have even pushed up the release date by 2 or 3 weeks. Anything, so long as it's not right on the coattails of Nintendo's biggest game. Ditch the weapons triangle. I wasn't fond of the element system from Hyrule Warriors. I thought it just bogged the game down too much and prevented you from using the characters you wanted unless you felt like spending 2 minutes chipping away at one Re-Dead Knight. Basically, if you wanted to play as your favorite dark-based character like Ganondorf or Midna, you dealt extra damage to light-based enemies and less damage to dark-based ones. If you couldn't foresee the dominant enemy type and chose your character poorly, you were stuck in a mission that would take twice as long simply because enemies became damage sponges. It was this system Koei Tecmo was adamant about inserting into Fire Emblem Warriors, referencing the traditional weapons triangle from the Fire Emblem series this time. The worst part, though, isn't just how it might slow the game's pacing. It's that there now needs to be diversity in character weaponry, as you might as well equip every sword user with a sharp stick for all the good it'll do them going up against an army of lances. Since most Fire Emblem protagonists are assigned holy blades at some point in the story, including all the protagonists in this game would throw up new complications. Koei Tecmo's solution to this? Narrow the focus to the 3 most recent Fire Emblem titles rather than all the lords and cherry-pick a diverse cast. Not a bad idea, right? They did this rather poorly. First of all, literally about half of the revealed cast so far are sword users. They were so busy waxing on the importance of weapon diversity they didn't realize that bus had already come and gone. They seem to have forgotten their own point. Secondly, the weapons triangle is a neat staple of the Fire Emblem franchise, but it's hardly worth sacrificing the whole point of the game over. No Fire Emblem fan woke up one day and went, "You know what 2 series are really similar? Fire Emblem and Warriors!" No. Fans wanted to Fire Emblem Warriors because in a long history of Warriors crossovers, Fire Emblem was the most obvious fit with an extensive history of worlds and characters to pull from. One little nuance, a nuance that slows the game down, is not worth neutering the reason people wanted this game to begin with. That reason being that people wanted to play as their favorite classic characters with tried and true Warriors gameplay. But Hyrule Warriors did the same thing, I magically hear some of you complaining, and nobody thought twice about it. Because the Zelda series barely has characters in general, let alone characters that can fight. Nobody minded it only pulling from Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword because there were barely any characters to look forward to. Link and Ganondorf were obvious, you've got some villains you can throw in for good measure, you can stretch for Zelda and Impa as certain incarnations of them have been seen fighting, and then you have to get really creative to fill out the remaining character slots. Ruto and Fi have never been shown to have combat capabilities. Darunia was never shown fighting either. For crying out loud, Agatha wasn't even part of Twilight Princess's story. There wasn't much to look forward to in characters because Koei Tecmo had to stretch for virtually all of them. Fire Emblem, on the other hand, has decades of memorable games and characters. It chose to shelve those to focus on the weapons triangle. This is ultimately what killed the game. Its other issues like the release date are just holding it down while the weapons triangle administers the lethal injection. Lead with the familiar faces, not with the little guys. At the time I'm writing this script, we don't yet know Fire Emblem Warriors' full roster. My favorite character of anything ever, Ike, could very well be in the base game. So could Hector, or Ephraim, or Roy, or Alm, or Sigurd, or any of the other shining beacons of the franchise we hoped would appear. That's when some of you will cry, "Ha!" and tell me what a sap I was for thinking those beacons wouldn't be in the base game. And my rebuttal is this. The devs still helped kill the game by withholding them. You don't market a movie with an all-star cast by hiding the big names until the movie comes out. You lead with them to drum up hype and draw interest. If Ike is in this game, you don't hide that until the day of release. You hide Navarre, you hide Tiki, you hide anyone else and we're okay, but you don't hide the reason people flock to the game. That's just poor marketing. Get more involved with the community. We live in a golden age of transparency and social media. If there's a problem, the whole world can know within seconds. If fans take issue with your game, you have no excuse. You can't say you simply didn't know if you didn't even try to find out. For months, my friends, fans eagerly awaiting Fire Emblem Warriors to hit shores have been pointing out flaws and concerns, and to date, the developers have addressed precisely none of them. Releasing tons of character trailers and gameplay videos is nice, but if you don't address the root of the problem, it fixes nothing. People have been saying for months that the roster is weak and not enough to draw in the crowd it should. We have not heard so much as a tweet from the developers promising that things will get better. And it's not like this criticism just comes from the smallest, darkest corners of Reddit. Where there is Fire Emblem Warriors, there is heated discussion and complaining about the roster. It's hard to miss. They needed to address those concerns months ago, one way or another. They needed to promise potential buyers that their worries were being heard and considered. That olive branch would have done wonders for quelling the masses. But we know they weren't listening because of this next point. The DLC was the last stand, and it failed. So, you're committed to the game as it is, Koei Tecmo. Let's say you did gather fan feedback and you know where you went wrong. The roster is lacking, they say, but you can fix it. You can keep their interest by at least promising them their favorite characters down the road. But you didn't. You took the base game to focus on 3 titles in the series, and then after months of fans complaining about the focus, did the exact same thing with the DLC. The DLC was how we comforted ourselves when we were worried about the roster. Don't worry, we said. The roster now is just a temporary fix. The DLC will come along and clean all this up. And it makes perfect sense. Lead with 3 titles, then add DLC packs focusing on the other games. Let's say you make a Tellius pack that includes Soren, Titania, Sheenan, Soth, and Micaiah, along with some extra Colosseum challenges, new character support conversations, and an all-new history mode map based on the stories of Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. That's how you reignite interest. Even those with no interest in the Warriors games would perk up once they heard something like that. That's what we were expecting. We were happy. We could take the limitations you gave us up front because we thought they were just laying the groundwork for something better. You effectively killed the last line of defense. This is what hordes of disappointed fans were holding out for, and you killed it. Fire Emblem veterans are upset. New players are upset. Everyone in between is upset. And again, it's not like this was some tragedy you never could have seen coming. Had you paid the slightest bit of attention to consumer feedback, you could have seen this coming months ago. So finally, stop relying on a sequel to patch things up because you're not going to make it happen if this game bombs. It's a poor man's solution to rely on DLC to make a game better. That's giving a lollipop to a man who just had his leg amputated. It's even worse when you intentionally half-butt-cheek a game because you're counting on people to buy it anyway and fuel a sequel. You need to make this game as good as it can be here and now before you even think about moving onward. If you botch this one, you're not going to have the momentum or the finances to try again. Scores of players were in love with the game when it was announced. Now, not too many of them are sticking around. That should tell you something. Listen, I want this game to succeed. I want a sequel. I want it to right the wrongs the first game committed, but that's simply not going to happen on its own. Koei Tecmo is practically asking players to pay $120 for the game they wanted. Buy the first game to get the sequel that does it right. Oh wait, I forgot to factor in the DLC. Make that somewhere in the ballpark of $150. In a world where Super Mario Odyssey releases the week after Fire Emblem Warriors and consumer interest has gone from a bright flame to a small puddle of embers, That's too much to ask. They're not going to spend their money on the game you developed, it's going to the one that's been playing its cards right since the beginning. If this was a game of poker, Koei Tecmo would be the one sniffing every time he thinks he has a winning hand, going all in every time, and failing to watch the other players for intel. They're losing. Now let me be frank, or Steve, or Todd, or whoever else I want to be. I will buy this game. I will buy every bit of DLC that goes with it. I will support it because I want this game to succeed. I love the game concepts, I love the cooperative play, I love the replay value being promised. On its own, Fire Emblem Warriors looks like an amazing game. What it needs to be, however, is an awesome love letter to Fire Emblem using the stylized pen of Warriors, and it's not. It's an ode to Awakening and Fates at best. And I love those two games, but that's not Fire Emblem. That's two games, incidentally the most divisive in the series despite their commercial success. I'm just sad that this could be the death of a great dream. Long before Fire Emblem Warriors was announced, I was playing Hyrule Warriors with my sister and voicing how awesome a Warriors game for Fire Emblem would be. Then it was announced at E3 of last year and I was stoked. Then I watched as it slowly poisoned itself every step of the way. I would love to see Koei Tecmo try again with a sequel, but I'm not optimistic it'll get one. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think I'm an idiot anyway? Let me know what you think and do be sure to subscribe because there will be more of this sort of thing in the future. See you next time. Not literally, I don't know where you live. If I did, that would be creepy. But I will communicate with you later. Thank you. Goodbye.